Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, welcome back to the Alex Garrett Sports Spotlight. And once again, it's Terminello's Take. And Lou, I know that it's sort of a low week. I do want to get your thought on this, though, because Michigan, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you, Alex. Always glad to be back.
Michigan State, you know, a lot of teams that are rivals in the Big Ten are coming and supporting Michigan State after last week's shooting, but I don't think you'd ever see that kind of unity on the court in Ann Arbor like we saw this past weekend.
No, that's for sure, and that was just tragic what happened, obviously, in East Lansing last week, just a terrible tragedy, and obviously they postponed one of the games and all athletic contests at Michigan State last week, and now they've resumed. But that Big Ten is tough, but when it comes to these tragedies, they all pull together.
Then Michigan wins, but besides the point, I think that it is good to see the Big Ten rallying around its own.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, obviously, the Big Ten is one of the preeminent conferences, not only in football and basketball, but also in hockey. And as we move into the future with the Big Ten, with the addition of the two Pac-12 teams coming in 2024, the Big Ten is going to be even bigger than ever. And look how difficult this year the Big Ten is. There's like 6 teams that have 7 losses in the conference. What a competitive conference. Northwestern beats Purdue. These games are all competitive. There's really no walkovers. You can't circle a game on your schedule and say, okay, we just have to roll out the basketball and beat them. So the Big Ten is major league, even at the collegiate level from top to bottom, and basically just about everything they do.
And we know it's former commissioners, now president of the Bears. I mean, they've got a lot to deal with Justin Fields and what they do if they get the number 1, which I don't think they're going to trade out for that. But that's another story for another day because, Lou, a baseball treasure has left us, and we have to talk about Tim McCarver, don't we?
We have to talk about Tim McCarver. He is not only a Hall of Fame broadcaster, and everybody just looks at him as a color analyst, but he was an excellent play-by-play man, and as somebody who grew up as a Met fan and is still a Met fan to this day, and anybody who follows the Mets, after the Mets traded Tom Seaver and Kingman and stripped down the team on the famous trade deadline massacre, midnight massacre when the trade deadline was on June 15th back in the old days, 1977, the Mets went through horrendous times. They were totally mismanaged. Between 77 and 83, they lost between 94 and 98 and 99 games. The only year they didn't lose 90 plus was the 81 strike year. And it was really, especially coming off the first 17 years of Mets baseball, which, yes, they were an expansion team and they were losing 100 games, but that was an expansion era that's not like expansion teams today. They were drawing from a very low pool of players. They were getting the dregs of other teams' retreads. But the Mets built up, and obviously being a National League team in New York after the Dodgers and Giants had left 4 years earlier, the Mets were very popular. Then, like I said, that midnight massacre when they traded Seaver, Kingman, they stripped down the team. The Mets were terrible for 6 years. I mean, Alex, this was before your time. Believe me, they were a non-entity. They were non-competitive. Then in '83, they got Darryl Strawberry, and then the next year they got Davey Johnson as their manager, and they brought up Dwight Gooden for his rookie year. They had gotten Keith Hernandez at the trade deadline on June 15th, 1983. In 1983, they also signed a free agent at the end of the 1982 season. Somebody didn't come to bat, somebody who didn't throw out a runner, but somebody who gave the Mets some pizzazz. And you combined the hiring of Tim McCarver to the Mets broadcast team with the with the influx of the new talent that came in, and from '84 until '90, the Mets had the best record in baseball. They only won the one World Series. They only went to one World Series, which we can go into a long story on why they didn't win more. But there was obviously some issues there with Strawberry and Gooden that we all know about. But we're here to talk about Timmy. And Tim McCarver added pizzazz to the Mets broadcast with Steve Zabriskie and the great Ralph Kiner. It was must-see TV. Between Gooden just dominating, Strawberry winning Rookie of the Year in '83, the Mets went from 68 wins in '83 to 90 wins in '84. We're in it most of the summer with the Cubs. Then in '85, they won 98 games. And remember, there was no wild card in those days. So the Mets, if it was nowadays, the Mets would have made the playoffs like 8-9 years in a row. But listening to McCarver every night, and the Mets TV ratings were off the charts, and he added to that. You learn something every night with Tim McCarver. He didn't overspeak. He put it in succinct language. I learned a lot about the game from Tim McCarver. Even people who knew the game learned from Tim McCarver. He just was a special guy, and he made that Met era. He's part of that Met era. And one of the things that the Mets have not done that it's a wrong that they have to right. Now, unfortunately, Timmy's gone. But Tim McCarver not being in the Mets Hall of Fame after being elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame as a broadcaster is a mistake. Tim McCarver should be in the Mets Hall of Fame.
Well, I had heard, Lou, that he enlivened Ralph Kiner, because even Phil Mushnick wrote about this weekend, that he enlivened Ralph Kiner. So would you say because of that partnership, Kiner's Corner is born because of that connection on Mets broadcast?
Well, Kiner's Corner was started in 1962. It used to be pre and post, then it was just post. And it was probably the most popular post-game show in the history of televised baseball back in those days when there was no cable TV. The Dodgers had a show like that, I believe, in the 50s when they were in Brooklyn. But he might have, and they did bring Kiner's Corner back periodically in the 80s and 90s. I think Tim's knowledge, Tim's personality brought the best in Ralph back because Ralph was incredibly knowledgeable. He was prepared for every game, even at a later age when he was 79, 80. He came to every game prepared. They had great chemistry together, and Tim McCarver's personality on the air was something that any listener could appreciate. They say people don't watch games to listen to announcers. I disagree. I enjoyed listening to Tim McCarver. I enjoy listening to when Vince Scully was on the air. I enjoyed listening to John Madden. I enjoy listening to Al Michaels. I mean, people who say that announcers don't make a difference, I disagree.
But as a player,
I enjoy listening to Dick Enberg.
As a player, I thought Tim did incredible. Obviously he caught Bob Gibson, and no one really talked about that in his passing, I feel like, and that should be talked about.
Well, obviously, when I first started watching baseball in the 60s, the Cardinals were a dominant team the last decade of the 60s. They contended in 63, which was Stan Musial's last year as a player. But in 64, they came from behind. They were down 6.5 games with 10 games to go, and they rallied to win the National League pennant on the last day of the season as a team that was in first place, the Philadelphia Phillies, lost 10 games in a row. And they played the Yankees in the 64 World Series, and Tim had a big part in that. He caught every inning of every game. And in the pivotal Game 5, with the series tied at 2-2 at Yankee Stadium, I'll never forget this, on a Monday afternoon, Bob Gibson had the Yankees shut out to the bottom of the ninth, and I believe there was 2 out, and Tom Tresh, the 2-run homer to right to tie the game. Then at the top of the 10th inning, Tim McCarver hit a 3-run homer to give the Cardinals a 5-2 win. Then in '67, they won the World Series again, and Gibson at that point won the World Series MVP again. Then in '68, it looked like he was going to win World Series MVP again, but they blew a 3-1 lead, and Gibson did lose Game 7 in '68 when Curt Flood, one of the most brilliant fielders of his time in center field, misjudged a fly ball, and they end up losing 4-1. Tim McCarver, I believe, made the last out of the '68 World Series. He was a tremendous player. He finished second to his teammate, Orlando Cepeda, in 1967 for MVP. And he's not a Hall of Famer, but he's a better ball player than Harold Baines, who's in the Hall of Fame. You could also say he's a better ball player than Scott Rowland. But that's just my opinion.
Hey, I've got to ask about this because then he goes back to the broadcast, and I got to know him through the Yankee years when, he would not only be there for Fox broadcasts with Joe Buck and Tim McCarver, then it was, of course, Bobby Mercer and Tim McCarver. And if you ever were around him, he had this energy that was so welcoming and so inviting. And I do think the broadcast booth misses that invitational feel around him.
Oh, I totally agree. He was an any era broadcaster. I mean, obviously in the old days where we just had radio and TV in New York, even growing up in the old days, the Mets and Yankees televised well over 125 games. There was no cable. All the games were either on over-the-air TV, Channel 9 or Channel 11. A lot of teams did not broadcast games throughout the country outside of New York, maybe 25 a year. So the radio became even more important to them. And that's why you have the legendary guys like Harry Carey doing all those games for the St. Louis Cardinals before he became iconic with the Cubs. Jack Buck, going back to Scully. When the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn to Los Angeles, they went from 125 games a year on Channel 9 to 20 games a year in Los Angeles. That's all they televised for many, many years, over 2 decades. So Scully became the personality for those people who listened to Dodger baseball. And we can go right down the line. There's so many guys like that. There's so many teams. Lon Simmons for the Giants. There's just, there's that. They had that special connection with the listener, and Tim had that. He definitely had that, and he only did TV. And he's the best color commentator in the history of Major League Baseball television.
It was a pleasure listening to him and Bobby Mercer, though. The Southern accents got to me. Listening to both of them, and they were the nicest guys to ever, walk the halls of Yankee Stadium, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah, well, Bobby Mercer was a wonderful guy, and as we said, we know Tim McCarver was also. So that was a good team. I think they were there for. McCarver was there for 3 years, then left the Yankees. I think he did 25 San Francisco Giant games in 2002. And I know up until the pandemic, he was doing 25 to 30 Cardinal games a year. And even before the pandemic, I had heard him a couple of times, and he was as good as ever. Even at the age of 77, 78, he was on top of his game. Obviously, his anticipatory situations are legendary. Telling one game and when the Mets rally to beat Hershiser in Game 1 as on ABC, part of the best 3-man team in history. Al Michaels calling the play, Jim Palmer as the other color commentator along with Michaels. He said, John Shelby's playing way too deep in center field for Gary Carter. He's playing on Gary Carter's reputation, not the Gary Carter that is right now. And as you know, catchers go, their prime ends earlier, and Carter wasn't the power hit he was in '88 when they played the Dodgers, and he dumped a ball in front of Shelby. Mets were able to get 2 runs and rallied to beat Hershiser 3-2, but he was on top of that. Obviously, in the 2001 World Series, for Fox when he said Mariano Rivera throws that cutter. Left-handed hitters will bloop a hit off that cutter, as he challenged the strategy of the Yankees playing the infield in. Long story short, if the Yankees had played at regular depth, Jeter would have caught that ball, and who knows what would have happened. But he was a brilliant guy. I mean, he knew the game. I know he was there early every game to prepare. He loved calling the games. I mean, I know many times there was a Fox game at 1 o'clock at Yankee Stadium, and he was working the national broadcast, and the Mets would be on at 4 o'clock. After the national broadcast, he'd come up. He'd drive the 8 miles to Shea Stadium, and he would get in there in the bottom of the first or top of the second inning, and he'd do that game also. He loved the game. He's, like you said, he's a baseball treasure, that's for sure.
One last
remember,
thing,
he
I
was
also
Tim
think
McCarver's
he kept Joe
personal
Buck
catcher.
grounded. What I mean by that is there was a point where Buck was doing Fox Sports MLB, Fox Sports NFL the same weekend, and Tim was like, man, they got him running all over the place. But I think that he grounded him into the baseball world a little bit every time Joe Buck was in the booth.
Well, Joe Buck had some very kind words for the passing of McCarver last week, as did Bob Costas, as did Al Michaels. Like I said, with Michaels, Palmer, and McCarver, they were the best three-man booth that you can ask for. And I am not for three in the booth. I think it should just be two. But if there was ever one that worked, that three-man booth did work.
Well, let's switch to the radio because I don't know if you saw this study, but apparently Westwood One Sports is saying March Madness is going to be heard on radio a little bit more than TV. Did you see that study I sent you?
Yeah, I did, and that's interesting, but it's true when you really think about it, because March Madness has become it's an event for the casual sports fan, and a casual sports fan is going to watch it on TV. They're not going to listen to it on radio, as that study showed. Westwood One has the exclusive broadcasting rights, as you know, to every March Madness game. And real sports fans will always find the game. But the casual sports fans who are going to circle Belmont Abbey on their bracket or NJIT on their bracket, and not even know what NJIT stands for, they're going to watch it on television. They're not going to go searching for it on radio. But sports on the radio was a little bit different. Obviously, there's court geography, field geography, ice geography that you have to paint the word picture. I enjoy listening to sports on the radio. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a more loyal fan base as far as being loyal to the sport, being loyal to, as they were saying, to different sponsors. They're more apt to buy a product from one of the sponsors. So that doesn't surprise me, Alex.
Well, it is good to hear. By the way, don't sleep on Gary Cohen's national calls. He has had some great calls in the Westwood One world. Remember Ohio State a few years ago? He had a big call at the end of that game. So he's always active, even if it's not St. Hall. He's always on the radio somewhere. Right.
He's an outstanding, obviously, basketball broadcaster as well as baseball broadcaster, and I know he enjoys doing that. The first weekend of the NCAAs, unless Seton Hall's in the NCAAs like they have been for the last 4 or 5 years.
Well,
they're on the bubble this year. I don't know if they're going to make it, Alex.
It's been a strange season for both teams. It's been rather disappointing, if I don't want to sugarcoat it here. I don't see the NCAAs in either team here in St. John's or Seton Hall's future. Do you this year?
No, I do not. I mean, Seton Hall is closer to the bubble, depending on whose bracketology you look at. One of them has them as the first four. I think it was Fox had them as the first four out. Somebody had them as the first four in before they lost to UConn, and that was a tough loss because once they lost Raymond, they were in trouble 3 minutes into the game. But they play tough D, but they have the same problem that so many major college basketball teams have. They go through these ridiculous long offensive droughts. College basketball is nowhere near the caliber of play on the court as it was 10, 12 years ago. It just isn't. So many of these teams can't execute an offense, and I really think it's because you have these players from the transfer portal that come and go, and you can't build continuity offensively. Seton Hall plays great defense, if going back to Seton Hall, but they can't score. They can't score. Even Connecticut has had trouble scoring. So and Alex, I really don't know who are the bubble teams that are going to get in, and I can't even tell you who's like everybody now. Kansas won a couple of games. Kansas. They're the defending champions. I don't know if there's anybody you could really bank on right now, and maybe that'll change in the next couple of weeks before Selection Sunday, which I believe is March 12th. Maybe somebody will separate themselves, but I don't see it. I mean,
you say as a Big East fan,
open.
I'm excited for all these upsets that seem to be happening. You know, you had what was it? On Friday night, you had that big upset with Xavier and whatnot. So it's still a pop in the division this year, conference this year.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no great teams. There's no legendary teams coming out of this. I mean, I think UCLA is good. I think Kansas, obviously, they're national champion. They're playing very well. North Carolina is in the fight of their life. They're 0-9 against Quad 1 opponents. Here's a team that was number one early in the year. They went to the national championship game surprisingly when a lot of people were surprised that they got into the tournament. They might have been the last or next to last team to get into the tournament last year, got to the championship game, which raised the level of their anticipation being a contender this year. They may not make it. I mean, they're 16-11, and, you know, I don't know if they're going to make it. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see. It's going to be it'll be an interesting tournament because it'll be so wide open, and a lot of teams will have a chance. But I really haven't seen great basketball this year on the college level.
And on
That's
the NBA front,
view.
you know, the Nets have really changed with the changes with Kyrie and with KD leaving. Have you seen any improvement? You're our Nets expert as well. Have you seen any improvement since the trades?
Well, I appreciate you calling me the Nets expert. I don't know if that's true, but obviously the Nets are in a very tough situation. I don't know where they're going to end up this year. They might fall to the play-in, but I could tell you one thing. Jacques Vaughn deserved the extension that he got yesterday from Sean Marks. I think considering that 6 weeks ago they had the second-best record in the NBA, one game behind the Celtics, and it looked like Durant was going to be MVP and then hurt his knee. And then you know what happened after that, the Kyrie situation, the trade there, and then Durant's trade. I think the Nets did well in the trades considering where they're at. Obviously, Mikal Bridges is somebody that Phoenix did not want to part with, and they had to get Durant, and he scored 45 points. He showed an offensive side of his game that he didn't show in Phoenix because they play a different style of game. Obviously, he's a keeper for the Nets. Cam Johnson's a restricted free agent. I assume they'll sign him. Dorian Finney-Smith, according to the New York Post, the team offered Sean Marks 2 number ones for him last week, and the Nets said no. So I think they've done a good job in making the best out of a bad situation. I mean, they have too many of the same type of players in my estimation. So I think you'll see some trades in the offseason. They have 3 number ones. I think they have 3 number ones with no stipulation this year. They might use 2 of those number ones to draft guys. They might trade up. If there's a guy that can't miss, I don't know. I don't know who's the next star on the horizon. Yeah, I know there's this French kid who's supposed to be the unanimous number one. We'll see. But Sean Marks, I think, has made the best out of a very difficult situation. They need a lead guard. Are they going to get a lead guard as good as Kyrie? They're not. Kyrie's a spectacular player on the court, but they got to get bigger. They got to get more balance with the roster. Like I said, they have too many of the same type of players right now, and we'll see what happens. They play hard. Coach Vaughn has them ready to play every night. But, again, you need talent. Nick Claxton's a keeper. The improvement from last year to this year has been incredible. And we'll see.
Well, I want to pick your brain on something else that we really were heated up about a few weeks ago. And
I'm sorry, Alex.
Coming to the forefront, which is the idea that these guys are literally willing themselves in the NBA, meaning Kyrie can sit because he feels like he can sit, KD can sit because he feels like he can sit, or not so much KD. He would have, I know he was traded, but Kyrie really was the guy that said, yeah, I can do whatever I want because, they're at will to meet. Isn't that a problem if the player feels the team is at will to the player?
Alex, it's a major problem. And I know Durant said that if you can't trade me, we'll make it work here, at least for the rest of the year. But then at the All-Star game in Salt Lake City this past weekend, by the way, the All-Star game got the lowest television rating in its history. So people are fed up with a lot of things with the NBA. But Durant said that players demanding trades is great for the NBA. It brings attention to the NBA. I couldn't disagree with Durant more. It makes the players look bad, makes the players look selfish. It makes the league look like they have no control over the players. And we've seen this through the last decade. Anthony Davis wanted to trade, got traded. Carmelo Anthony wanted to trade from Denver, he got traded to the Knicks. Jimmy Butler, we go right down the line. We can name 15 guys. And I believe that's an NBA problem. And that's different, than putting together super teams through free agency, which I'm not in love with, but at least it's not a trade demand. Players demanding trades and forcing their way out is a bad look for pro sports in general and the NBA specifically.
Do you see it trickling into other sports yet or not yet?
Well, I could see it trickling into other sports. I'm sure I could. With the NBA, it's a little bit different because there's only 12 players on the team, and they know if they get to a certain spot, like Durant going to Phoenix, where they have Devin Booker, where they have Chris Paul, who still can play. Yes, he's 37 years old. He's not the Chris Paul that he was 4 or 5 years ago. They have DeAndre Ayton, and Ayton's becoming better and better every day. He has a chance to win because one player in the NBA makes a huge difference, as we've seen throughout history, even going back 40 years, 50 years. But so I think the nature of the sport makes that different. I think if you trade Connor McDavid to the Arizona Coyotes, they'll be better, but they're not going to win anything.
And as much as McDavid is sort of, he's never going to be that Gretzky impact. Or is that what you're saying? Or?
Well, no, I'm not saying that he doesn't have. He definitely has a Gretzky type impact. I'm saying on a hockey team, you need more than one guy. You need 4 solid lines. You need 6 solid defensemen. You need a solid goaltender. In basketball, one guy can make all the difference in the world. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came out of UCLA and the Milwaukee Bucks won a coin flip with the Phoenix Suns in their third year, they went from an expansion team that won 25 games to winning 55 the next year, and then in their fourth year in existence, won the NBA championship. One guy, because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a fantastic player, one of the 2 greatest college players of all time, in my opinion, and one of the most underrated all-time greats. But I'm just using him as an example. We've seen it we've seen it through NBA history. David Robinson, Tim Duncan.
Well, one last thing here, because I just researched again because I had to check my eyes here. Daniel Jones wants $45 million a year as the Giant quarterback. I mean, this is wild that he would even think that he deserves that. I don't think he's that valuable yet.
No, he's not. And, I mean, it is crazy. He's taking advantage of a league that right now is a little short on effective quarterbacks. There's a lot of teams that don't have good quarterbacks, and he did a nice job last year. But let's face it, he didn't do a great job last year. He did a nice job. I actually thought he was going to, he'd get in the $22 million range, for 4 years, $25 million. If the Giants, I think that right now, and the Giants will cut some guys, I'm sure. If they give him $45 million, I think the Giants are only $53 million under the cap. That eats up their whole cap. And I have a feeling they're not going to sign Barkley. I mean, I would say it's 50-50. Let's put it that way. But
we'll have to
if
see.
they give Daniel Jones $45 million, Alex.
Real quick, so give us your final thoughts on that.
On Daniel Jones?
Oh, no, on the Jets side of things. So I know you wanted to weigh in on what happens with them.
Well, obviously the Jets, as I said to you, the week that they beat the Bears and Mike White did such a good job in that pouring rainstorm when they beat the Bears 31-10. No matter what, even if Mike White does well the rest of the year, they have a quarterback chaotic situation, and it's still chaotic because what do? Do you sign Derek Carr? Do you wait for Aaron Rodgers? You sign Derek Carr, you pay him money. You don't have to give up any assets, any draft picks, but money. If you get Rodgers, what do the Packers want? Do they want a number one this year? Do they want a number one next year for a guy who's going to play 2 years? For a guy who's the best quarterback that may be available? We don't even know if he's available yet. If he ever comes out of his retreat, I guess we'll know if he's going to play or not. But there was something that happened yesterday that might change where Rodgers' destination is going to go. It looks like Brock Purdy is really, really badly hurt. And doctors were saying that he may not be ready for opening day next year, and he might have a long rehabilitation situation. I don't know if we're going to see Brock Purdy next year. Rodgers, who comes from that area, he played his college ball at the University of California. I still think that could be a landing spot for him. As far as what the Jets do they wait to see what Rodgers is going to do and Carr sign somewhere else? That would really be tough unless they don't like Carr, but all indications are that they were impressed with Carr this weekend.
Well,
tough spot for the New York Jets.
There's so much
Very
more to get
tough
to
spot.
next week. We got to get into the NHL, NBA, real playoff races shaping up here. But I'm glad we honored Tim on this episode, Tim McCarver. Did you get to know him personally, by the way?
I did not. I never had the opportunity of meeting Tim McCarver. You did, I know that.
It was great to be around, great to my dad and I. So forever thankful for that connection, and we miss him.
Oh, yeah, no, he's missed, no doubt about it.
And Lou, I know that we're going to push on through into March here. I can't believe we're hitting March, but there's a lot to come, isn't there, on the Terminello's tape?
Yeah, no, there's obviously the end of the last 7 weeks of the hockey and basketball seasons. I mean, the Knicks are playing well. We'll see where they end up. I think they'll inch up in the standings. I mean, the Nets are trying to hold on. I have no idea what to gauge what's going to happen there. They start off with 9 out of their 11 games after the break on the road, and then finish up with 10 of 13 at Barclays. So who knows what's going to happen? I think you just wait until the April 13th or 15th, whenever the last day of the season is, to see where the Knicks and Nets are going to land. The three hockey teams, the Rangers and Devils, both are playing well. I think with the trade deadline next week, it'll be interesting to see if the Devils add anybody. I think they will. I think the Rangers might be done. after they added Tyler Mott. We'll see. Islanders have a ton of injuries, and we'll see what happens. So we can discuss that more further next week.
We also know for Lent you're not giving up sports, so that's a good thing.
That's one thing I can't give up.
Have a blessed 40 days here. We'll be in touch in the next week or so for another Terminello's Take, Lou.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.
Thanks, as always, for joining the Alex Garrett Sports Spotlight. That was perfect, because now my board's going to go hot in 8 minutes for Cats at Night.